So, hey guys, I've sort of found this thing that someone else on YouTube was doing, and I actually thought that I might get on the action too. I've never really heard of the Tumblr voice meme before. Apparently it started off as an experiment to show regional accents, so that's kind of interesting. But people just eventually adapted it into questions about your favourite series, and I'd very much like to answer a lot of these for this Fire Emblem Awakening one, or more Fire Emblem in general, because, well, I love the series, and I find this is a very good way to get an insight into what a certain fan thinks of the series. Certainly did with his video, so I really felt like I wanted to do one. So, for those of you who don't know, I will put the questions up on screen here, and I'll just go through these in order, okay? So, my username, I am Big Clingy. Yep, that's what I've always been known as since I started out here, and I am actually, now, yeah, I'm going to explain the origins of my username for the very first time in this video, because I kind of feel like this is a good time. It's actually Fire Emblem related. It comes from sort of a story of mine that I had while I played Fire Emblem growing up, so I'm actually finally going to be explaining the origins of my nickname for all those mystified about it. So, yes, where am I from? I am from Australia, obviously, if you can't tell by my, well, my accent isn't that particularly Australian-sounding, but, like, it's kind of weird. When I hear it in my head, it's not, and then when I listen to it actually recorded, it sounds really, really heavy for some reason. But, yes, I come from Australia, so it's been hard living in the land of screw you gamers, but thankfully, things are getting a bit better. Oh, I had to wait like almost 6 months for Radiant Dawn though. That was annoying. I actually sent Nintendo Australia an angry letter complaining about why we didn't have that game yet when America had had it for, again, like 6 months. But, yeah, I did eventually end up getting a completely impersonal generic response later, and by that time the game was already out, but at least they gave me a response. Anyway, enough of a tangent. So, I'm just going to skip straight to how were you first introduced to the series? And this is interesting. I actually got into this series pretty much by accident. I played Smash Bros. Melee, so I knew of Roy and Marth and stuff, and I thought that Roy was pretty cool. And of course, I don't think that now after I played his game. Stupid, stuck at level 20 until 3 chapters to go before the end of the game. But that's beside the point. I wasn't really that interested, though, in the series, and I just really saw them as two other characters, that's it. Like, I had fun playing as them, but I didn't really see, you know, any real series behind them. Fire Emblem 7 did come out in the West, but even though I may have been slightly interested in it, like, by that point, I had got into Advance Wars, so, and it's funny, I actually didn't think that I ever would get into Advance Wars, and then I played it, and I thought it was awesome. But I still wasn't really, you know, decided on Fire Emblem. Again, the real reason I got into the series was by complete accident. You see, my parents wanted to get me Pokemon Fire Red for my 13th birthday, and accidentally got me Fire Emblem instead. Actually, I happened to get Fire Red as well for my birthday, so that was a pretty good birthday, I will admit. But yeah, I got Fire Emblem for my birthday by complete accident. I played it, I loved every second of it. I was instantly hooked. Like, the game pretty much immediately hooked me right from the get-go. Within a few hours, I had played through all of Lynn's story, just marathon that, and I completely loved the game. Of course, I was a total idiot back then, and actually let quite a few people die on my first playthrough, sadly. I also, for some very odd reason, thought that Hawkeye was the best character ever. I'm really not sure why, but I just did. Him having a unique battle sprite probably had something to do with it, but granted, I also couldn't find the Ocean Seal, so for all I knew, he was the only Berserker in the game, and I love seeing him critical all the time, but that's... Anyway, so basically, yeah, I got into this series by complete accident, and I've been hooked ever since. I believe the second one I played was Path of Radiance, which I just happened to find in a game store one day, because I had no idea that game was even coming out. I didn't follow releases back then. And it was about that time that I had discovered by various looking at walkthroughs on the internet, I heard they referred to the Fire Emblem that I played as the 7th game in the series. I eventually discovered the Japan-only Fire Emblems and played those, a lot of those, most of them. I played Mystery of the Emblem, I've played, I believe now I've played everything except for Gaiden, which I really need to do. I might want to actually play through that at some point, though. Need to do Gaiden. I have not played the first game, only because Shadow Dragon and Mystery of the Emblem exist, so there's really no point to playing the first game anymore, except for hilarity value. For just how weird some things were back then, like healer experience. Getting hit to level up, yeah. And I have not actually finished Fire Emblem 5 yet, because I rage quitted at the side quest where you get, Aval back. That side quest was just way too frustrating for its worth. But I have to do it because I'm a character perfectionist, I need to recruit everyone. Yes, I did get Xavier, by the way, that nearly killed me. But yeah, and I've played every game ever since, so that's kind of my story about how I got into the series. Now, next question. Any ships or OTPs? Now, I'm probably going to really answer pretty much the same way that this other guy that I got inspired by to do this for answered. Mostly just canon stuff, like Eliwood and Ninian, Roy and Lilina, Sigurd and Deirdre. He forgot Marth and Sheeta, so I might as well put Marth and Sheeta here. Crom and Sumia, obviously. Yeah. And when it comes to slightly, not quite canon things, I have always liked Hector and Lyn in Fire Emblem 7, I just do, mainly because, like Eliwood and Ninian, they actually get conversations during the main story, and they get one special conversation that plays a unique theme you never hear elsewhere. That's actually a remix from Fire Emblem 4, which is kind of interesting. Weirdly enough, though, I've never actually got that conversation myself, despite me supporting them in almost every playthrough. I keep forgetting that it's the shopping spree chapter that you have to do it in. Like, it seems really weird that that's the chapter you got to initiate the conversation in, but, always missed it on my playthroughs. But, anyway, yeah, that one. And, oh, I forgot to mention Levin and Fury. Lewin and Fury, whatever. Despite the fact that it sort of ends badly, well, you'll see why when I mention one of my answers to one of the later questions. As for Awakening pairings, warning, bias alert incoming, my personal favourite pairing with male avatar is Pan, like, by far. That is definitely my favourite male avatar pairing. Mainly because it lets her have 2 children, and I like that. I also like giving Yarn a sibling, and the sibling supports Yarn has with Morgan I really like. They're certainly a heck of a lot better than non-sibling Morgan and Yarn, which is just kinda creepy. And, yeah, I really like Yarn having a sibling, so he doesn't have to be the last of his kind anymore. And, come on, bunnies, have to have more than one child. And, yeah, I like the whole fact that, seriously, Pan has been through so much, she deserves to have a happy family, she deserves to not be alone anymore. And that's, part of the reason why I like that. Though, I will admit, probably my second male avatar pairing consideration would probably be Tiki. You might notice that I tend to prioritize the ones that give Morgan classes that they would not be able to access normally, and that's another reason why I like them for gameplay purposes, because, yeah, they're the only way to give Morgan new classes, but, yeah, so in terms of male avatar pairings, yeah, my favourite is definitely Pan and probably Tiki second, although I do see why Cordelia is so popular. And, I wonder if, my sister wants me to mention female avatar pairings. I will say that, I'll just say that she really, really likes, female avatar and Kellum. But admittedly, anyone with Kellum is the most ridiculously heartwarming thing ever. I will get onto this when I do Awakening, but I will seriously say, please pair Kellum with someone, because literally all of his pairings are just ridiculously heartwarming, so, yeah. I also kind of like female avatar and Gangrel, just because that actually helps redeem him. But, anyway, that's enough of that. Now, no TPs. Now, this one is kind of interesting because I don't like dissing anyone's pairings, and I actually will say I totally support any pairing from Awakening. I do love the fact that when J-Wits did his top 10 Nintendo couples, his second from the list is literally any possible pairing in Awakening, because they are all awesome. And I totally agree with that. Like, it's up to the player to decide what pairings they prefer, so I'm not going to say anything for Awakening. I am going to say I do have two things that I want to say here for pairings that I'm not really into, and they both involve the same character from the same game. And now, these are not because I don't like the pairing, but because I don't really like how the gameplay handles it. And this one that I'm going to mention is Alec and Sylvia. Now, the only reason why I don't really like this pairing is because this pairing is extremely easy for newbies to accidentally make. You wouldn't believe the number of times I've browsed the Fire Emblem 4 forums, looked at new players who are going into the game blind, and seeing them say, "Whoops, I accidentally paired Alec and Sylvia." Almost every new player does this at least once. It gets to the point where it's very hard to avoid pairing them unless you specifically take steps to keep them away from each other. And not only that, but if you actually do manage to pair them, which will most likely happen by complete accident, the game goes out of its way to guilt trip you for doing it. Like, their lover conversation in the final chapter implies that it was an accidental unwanted pregnancy, which is kind of a bit harsh. And that's the reason why I don't like this, not because of the pairing itself, but because of the way the game tries to trap newbies into making it, and then it guilt trips them as if they've done something wrong. I really think that the game should never guilt trip the player for something that probably wasn't their fault, and this is just one of those cases that sort of bugs me when it comes to game design. I've seen so many new players accidentally do this pairing without meaning to, and I don't think it's fair for the game to guilt trip them over it. Again, this is just mainly a game design consideration, because Fire Emblem 4, the thing I like about it is, its pairing system is, in all other cases, really kind on new players. Generally, the easier to make pairings are the ones that are best stat-wise for the next generation. Alec and Sylvia, although it's good for her daughter, kinda renders Corporal useless. I mean, he's useless in a lot of pairings, but it just, well, I just don't like how it breaks the rules of Fire Emblem 4, the whole idea that, generally speaking, new players should have an easy time because the easier pairings that are hinted at by the story usually won't screw you over in the second gen. And this is the one case where it sort of breaks that and goes out of its way to guilt trip you for it when it's not really... Anyway, I think I've said enough about that. And the other pairing... I use inverted commas here because it's not actually a pairing, but it is something that I very dislike, and it involves the same character. This quote-unquote pairing is killing Sylvia to get her substitute children. Yep, this is probably the only quote-unquote pairing that I absolutely despise in the series. Seriously, I get, min-maxing, but killing a character just because their children are supposedly statistically better, that just really, really bugs me, and just strikes me as way too cruel. Like, seriously, Sylvia does not deserve to die for the sake of your eugenics, people. She really doesn't. So, that's basically all I have to say about that. Now, the next question is, talk about some of your favourite Fire Emblem headcanons, and I actually have one already. And it's probably kind of an interesting one, but here it is. Murdoch from Fire Emblem 6 and 7 is half dragon, or at least has dragon blood. Now, the reason why, I've thought of this, is that if you look at, basically, if you look at a website like serenesforest.net, that basically shows how every character who appeared in FE7 has changed in FE6. And if you look at them, most of the characters are kind of, well, they've certainly looked like they've aged a lot, especially Marcus and Hector, and even Barte got a moustache. Zephyr looks like he's aged much more than 20 years. But then you go to Murdoch. Murdoch barely looks like he's changed at all. Like, really, if you compare his old portrait to his new portrait... new portrait to old portrait, because one of them came from... But anyway, it's complicated. If you compare his 20 years later portrait to his 20 years earlier portrait, the only real change is a bit of extra shading around his eyes. That's basically it. Oh, and his hair is a bit less spiky, but you can attribute that to better graphics because FE7 was made later. So, really, Murdoch barely looks like he's changed. Oh, his collar's got higher, but that has nothing to do with him aging or anything. Like, if you just... I just find this a bit of a weird coincidence, because he's the only character, apart from Sophia and Far, who barely look any different. Sophia we know is half-dragon, and Far is an actual dragon. So, Murdoch? Yeah. I mean, even Carl, who doesn't look that different apart from a haircut, his face does look noticeably older, by quite a big deal. Merlinus went bald in the space of 20 years, Marcus's hair went grey, Hector grew a massive beard, Eliwood looks quite a lot older, and Zephyr, I've already mentioned how he seems to have aged at least 30 years, not 20, but Murdoch barely looks like he's aged at all, and that just strikes me as really odd, and has led to my theory that Murdoch is in fact part dragon, and explain why he was so difficult in his boss fight as well. Urgh. But yeah, it also wouldn't be that much of a stretch for someone with dragon blood to be living in Burn, but anyway, that was just my personal favourite headcanon that I just randomly came up with one day. Okay, now the name-saying section. Okay, say these names. Big Clingy, Crom, Vake. No, wait a minute. The Vake. You have to spell his name with a V, otherwise it doesn't count. The Vake. Shush. I really can't pronounce her English name. Fila, Yarn, Pan, Inigo, Plegia, Yillis, Pure Evil. Yes, this next word on the list is in fact correctly pronounced Pure Evil. There is no other pronunciation for it, so yeah. Cordelia, Lucina. Now, the weird thing is, I've always called her Lucina, and it looks like that's what the Japanese is kind of saying as well. But the English voice acting says Lucina, so I don't know, but I've always called her Lucina, so I'll just say that. Noir, Priam, Regna Ferox, Yen Fei. This next one doesn't work unless you say Owain the Giant Ham, Sayri, and, okay, Crom impression incoming. This is probably gonna sound terrible, but gods. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's the death quote version, but anyway. What's your favourite class/class tree and why? This one is a complete and total no-brainer. Generals. Now, a lot of people are going to laugh after saying that. The general class tends to be not well liked among the fandom because the fandom has gradually just kind of gravitated towards speedrunning and low turn counting, and those are things that I'm really not interested in. I prefer to take things slow, and because of that, I like generals. Also, I tend to gravitate towards defensive tactics in most games I play, as you can see if you've watched my Age of Empires run. Except maybe Pokemon. Pokemon might be the one exception, but I still like defensive tactics in Pokemon when they work. Well, I do definitely like healing move using tanks, but anyway. Also, other reasons, like, I seem to have this thing for knights in armor. I don't know why, but I like knights in armor. I just think they're really cool. I really don't know why that's the case. Maybe it's because I played Age of Empires as a kid. I was really interested in medieval history as a kid, so I think that's why. If you want to see how ridiculously I like armor and stuff, you might want to go check out my Pokemon X Blind run, the part where I fight Wickstrom. I had no idea what he was going to look like, and when I saw him and got my reaction live, yeah, that was pretty insane. But anyway, the other thing about generals is just that no damage sound, and watching the enemy do 0 damage to you is just so satisfying. Like, it really is. Having a character who can just stand in the middle of a huge army and just reliably take 0 damage from everything, it just feels so satisfying, and it's just so fun to me. And the other thing, so what if they've got low speed? Even if they're doubling you, that doesn't matter if they're doing nothing. 0 times 2 is still 0. So, yeah, that's why generals are certainly my favourite class. And now we come to where my username comes from, because this factors into it. Now, yup, my username relates to this. You see, the Clinky part was actually a nickname that me and my sister came up for a very long time ago when we first played Path of Radiance. It was our nickname for the Armor Knight class. It was based on the sound they make when they walk. It was kind of our onomatopoeia for the clinking of their armor. So we called them Clingies, yeah. And thus General was Big Clingy, and that's where my username comes from. It's, yeah, kind of weird now, but weird Fire Emblem story from growing up with the games, that's where my username comes from. It was my old nickname for the General class, so that's, yeah, why I'm using it. It just kind of stuck with me. So, apart from that, who's your favourite and least favourite character and why? Now here's the weird thing, you're probably expecting me to say my favourite character is someone from my favourite class. It's actually not! My favourite character in the entire Fire Emblem series is definitely Ced, aka Seti from Fire Emblem 4. This guy is just ridiculously awesome. The fact that he inherits 4 Seti, which gives him plus 20 speed, on top of his already 30 speed cap and already very, very good luck, gives him one of the most insane evasion rates in the series. This is someone who you can just stick him in the middle of an enemy army, the turn will be over, like, come the enemy phase, he will not get hit at all, and the whole army will be dead. He's kind of ridiculously broken but insanely fun to use, and I just like it. And yes, I much prefer him to 4 Seti Arthur, mainly because he's Lewin's canon child, but also because I don't find it as fun getting something that broken early in the game. The thing is, Ced joins exactly when you need somebody overpowered, and I really like that. And he has better luck as well, so he can, like, be, you know, completely ridiculous. He inherits Pursuit with from Fury without having to get a Pursuit ring for it. He can critical stuff, and, well, yeah, he pretty much just demolishes everything. So he's always been my favourite Fire Emblem character ever. And he's the reason that all my avatars have green hair in Awakening and in New Mystery of the Emblem as well. Yeah. Screw the rules, Seti has green hair. Or Ced. I actually like Ced, so, yeah. And the other thing is, I like him both gameplay-wise and personality-wise. Gameplay-wise, I've already said, but personality-wise, I really like his personality. He has a strong sense of justice. He goes around helping out some poor and oppressed people and saving them from corrupt nobles. He fights where people are in trouble. He can't, you know, turn a blind eye. I just really admire that. Also, he calls his father out for abandoning his mother, and gets +3 luck out of that, which helps him dodge even more. And he's an awesome supportive brother to his younger sister as well. Like, there's just so much to admire about his character. I just really like that guy. And now we come to the bit that I'm sort of dreading. Least favourite character. Now, I'll just get this out of the way. I really don't want to do this. I really don't want to have to do this. I understand that everyone has a valid opinion, and I know that a lot of people like this character. I just personally don't, but don't take this personally. I do not mean any offense to anyone. I dislike this character for purely personal reasons. And for nothing more. I'm not saying that it's not okay to like this character, because that's not me at all. And in fact, I actually feel really bad having to even say this stuff. Because I just don't feel, it doesn't feel right to people who like the character, and that's part of the reason why I'd rather get this out of the way now than have to bring it up during my Awakening playthrough. Because in that, I want people to watch that, and if they like the character, fine with them. They can still watch and won't have to hear me complaining. So I'll just get this out of the way now. Originally, I didn't really have anyone I didn't really like that much, at least based on personality. I would often make fun of Zealot from Fire Emblem 6 simply because of his pretty terrible growth rates, and people like Bantu and Violent, and you know all those ones, and Boa. But there was never anyone I actually really disliked in terms of personality. Unfortunately, it seems like with Awakening there's always at least one person you don't like, and for me that person is Henry, and a lot of people get really surprised that I say this. A lot of people cite him as one of the best localizations in the game. I'm really not a fan of his localization, and I'm not a fan of his character very much at all. And I think it's more a personal thing than anything else, and that's why I really don't like this, because I understand people have valid reasons for liking the character. I just feel that I think most of his humor is in very bad taste. Okay, let me just put this simply. Personally, I do not like humor that's based on cruelty. And I don't like humor that is based off of essentially murdering people. To me, Henry really almost feels like, to me, basically an unrepentant serial killer played for comedy, and I really don't like that. I just really don't. It's kind of weird, though. I'm not against dark comedy. Like, the Portal series is one of my favourite game series of all time. I find Portal absolutely hilarious. It has some of my favourite lines for comedy in any game ever. Probably absolutely my favourite lines for comedy in any game ever. Like, I really like Portal, and that does have some very dark comedy. But it's weird. I don't like the black comedy angle with Henry. I sort of don't. And it's just kind of a bit weird. It might be because the Japanese version tended to emphasize character development for him a bit more. The English version really plays up the dark humor angle with him. And I'm not saying that the English localization is bad for doing that, and I admit that there is some character development for him there. It's just that I will just say that, basically, here's the thing, like, I supported Henry and Olivia in my first playthrough of Awakening, mainly because I'd read their Japanese supports. The thing is, I started doing their English supports. From the very moment that I got their C, I was really creeped out by them. I was actually legitimately creeped out. I actually wanted to back out and pair Olivia with someone else, but I wanted to keep going just on the hope that maybe it got better. It didn't. And I got their S, and though I was left with an Inigo that I managed to make very good with the Vantage Wrath Vengeance combo, I honestly did not approve of Olivia being married to someone like that. It just really creeped me out, and I just honestly don't want to pair him with anyone ever again after seeing that. It's kind of weird, and I can't quite describe why. I just don't like the particular brand of dark humor they went with. I just don't think it's okay to have a character who is obsessed with blood, obsessed with killing people, thinking it's funny, and having the other characters think there's nothing wrong with that. That just really gets me. It's a weird thing, but call me hopelessly idealistic, but when I play a game, I like to know that my characters are unambiguously the good guys. And that's probably another reason why I don't like Western RPGs very much, because they often have morally ambiguous to outright evil party members. But that's not really anything, but just... Anyway, it's kind of weird. I can't quite describe exactly why. I just don't like Henry that much, and I don't like the brand of humor they went with for him. But, yeah, that's basically all I have to say there, and I really did not mean this as any offense to anyone at all, and I'm really sorry. I actually feel bad about having to say anything bad about a character. I really do, and I don't want to offend anyone. And again, that's why I've done this here, and not when I play Awakening. So, anyway, thankfully that question is out of the way. Favourite support conversation? I'm actually going to say something quite interesting here. There's a lot that I could pick that are more obvious choices. I'm going to go with a very obscure choice, simply because it's obscure and I wish more people knew about it. Luke and My Unit 3 in New Mystery of the Emblem. Now, the reason for this, I honestly thought that Luke was basically just a one-note joke character until I saw this conversation. In fact, the only reason that I gave him a bond drop was because I thought that his supports would be equally hilarious, and I expected a lot of comedy from his supports. And then we get to his third one, and I found out that Luke has so much more depth to him than I thought. It's really actually quite interesting. I never expected there to be a lot more depth to the character who originally I thought was again basically just a one-note comic relief character. And it showed that this is why we need support conversations. Support conversations show you that there is more to these characters. and these characters have depth and stuff. And this is why Radiant Dawn is really annoying for removing them, because it means that a lot of the characters like Edward and Nolan, who could have the potential to be really interesting characters, just aren't, because there are no support conversations, plain and simple. So yeah, if you want to actually see that conversation, I actually have it in my new Mystery of the Emblem playthrough. It's in one of the later chapters, I'll put a link in the description. I definitely recommend checking it out, because you will definitely change your opinion on Luke after seeing it. It's actually quite interesting. Honourable mentions are, of course, Vulcan Bastion's C support and Path of Radiance. That one is amazing. Also, as much as I was saying things about Henry before, Henry's supports with Rickon I think are very interesting because they show off an angle that Fire Emblem surprisingly has never done before. It actually humanizes a lot of the bosses that you were fighting previously. And again, despite the fact that Fire Emblem has done recruitable enemies since the very beginning, I don't think they've actually done this, like, even once. The fact that you find out, oh, those random generic bosses that you just killed without a second thought, they actually all had hobbies. They did stuff outside of war. They probably had families and things like that. And I just think that's quite interesting. Any other supports off the top of my head? Oh, right, also, Astor and Ingrid in Fire Emblem 6. The only reason for that is because this is literally the only support in Fire Emblem 6 that I remotely care for. Fire Emblem 6 is my least favourite game in the series, mostly because, to me, most of the characters feel really, really bland and uninteresting, and that really shows in its supports. The supports, to me, almost all of them are really generic and uninteresting, except for Astol and Ingrid, which actually has very interesting backstory, and I recommend you go look that up. I warn you though, it is very, very sad, but it is, to me, one of the few that actually gets me to care in that game. But anyway, favourite critical hit line. Okay, this one's a complete and total no-brainer. I'm just going to play it for you right now.
Now you go extinct!
Yeah, obviously that would be my favourite critical hit line. I just love that, like, seriously. Ever since Yarn did that line to Walhart the first time I played, that completely sold me. And it's just... it's probably the first time that I found a "no, you" something line legitimately awesome, and that's why I like it. Favourite confession. Now this is actually interesting. You're probably going to expect me to say my waifu here. I'm actually not, surprisingly enough. For this one, I'm actually going to say Sully, and this is kind of interesting. I've got interesting reasons for saying this. The main reason is, Sully was the first English confession that I ever heard. There was someone who got a pre-release copy of the game, like a reviewer, and he paired his avatar with Sully, and so he posted the confession, and it was probably one of the first English confessions that we ever saw. When I heard it, I thought the voice actress's performance on that line was amazing. Like, it was really good. Like, it surprised me so much. It really did. And that was the reason why I am saying this here, because that was my first indication that Awakening's English voice acting was going to be really, really good. And yeah, certainly that turned out to be true. And I say that because, well, Fire Emblem doesn't really have the best track record when it comes to English voice acting. Child, But yeah, so I'm actually saying Sully here just because, well, actually, you listen to it for yourself.
I love you, you bastard. There, I said it. Now don't ask me again.
I just really love the voice actress's performance on that line. I really, really do. And that's basically it. Say anything else that I'd like to? This video has already gone on for much longer than I thought, so I don't really want to. But anyway, that is my Fire Emblem voice meme. I hope people find this interesting, and yeah, I will see you all for other stuff. See ya!